navigation satellites to support its own lunar ambitions. Moon GPS is yet another small step taking us closer in our exploration of the cosmos.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of. A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA. Join the conversation.
Amid the mayhem and chaos of M23's takeover of the DRC, more than 50,000 people flee to Burundi, risking their lives by swimming across the Rusizi River. Over 20 dead in the last 2 weeks. The US government's sudden decision to axe funding for HIV programs is a wake-up call for South Africa. The country's health minister says the cuts could lead to deaths. And the love life of South Africa's Zulu king has the country excited and in suspense, and has scandalized his socially conservative subjects as he messes with tradition by seeking a divorce. World of Africa at these times on WION. World is One.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide, because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION, World is One.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching WION World is One. This is World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. I'm Shivan Chandra.
And I'm Hem Kaur Saroy, and on the show today, US President Donald Trump has given fresh ultimatum to the Palestinian militant group Hamas to release all hostages or face the consequences. This is Washington has now entered direct talks with the group. How things pan out in West Asia, that's something we'll explore on the show today.
Also on World DNA, Ukraine is planning to hold new talks with the United States, and this is after Washington suspended its intelligence sharing and paused aid to Ukraine, delivering a fresh blow to Kiev as it continues to battle Moscow's invasion. We will be tracking those developments for you as well. Let's start with the headlines.
I think you're going to hear a lot about it in the future. A new American company that will invest $500.
Donald Trump threatens further destruction of Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released, issues ultimatum to Hamas leaders to flee the territory. US President says he is sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job.
French President Emmanuel Macron announces he would discuss extending France's nuclear deterrent to European partners, raises possibility of sending European troops to Ukraine to enforce a peace deal.
A Russian missile strikes central Ukraine. Emergency officials say at least 2 killed and 14 people rescued after strike hits a hotel in city of Kryvyi.
Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik signs a law banning police and judiciary of his Serb entity. Bosnia's foreign minister denounces the law as a coup.
United States allows a 1-month exemption from tariffs on auto imports from Canada and Mexico, a day after levies on its neighbors came into effect. Move comes after US officials spoke with major American automakers.
Volkswagen unveils a small electric car priced around $21,000, set for a 2027 launch. The company aims to make EVs more accessible amid sluggish demand in Europe and fierce Chinese competition.
It was the ultimate smash and grab. Liverpool snatch a late winner to beat PSG away 1-0 in the first leg of their Champions League last 16 tie. All right, US President Donald Trump has given a fresh ultimatum to Hamas to release all hostages or face the consequences.
And this is as Washington entered direct talks with Hamas now. Trump threatened further destruction of Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released and issued an ultimatum to Hamas leaders to flee.
The US President posted on his Truth Social platform, "Release all of the hostages now, not later, and immediately return all of the dead bodies of the people you murdered, or it is over for you." Trump further wrote, I'm quoting again, "This is your last warning. For the leadership, now is the time to leave Gaza while you still have a chance."
Trump also made clear there would be repercussions for Gaza as a whole. He said to the people of Gaza, a beautiful future awaits, but not if you hold hostages. If you do, you are dead, quote unquote.
Trump posted his ultimatum after meeting with a group of 8 released hostages at the White House, where several of them offered their brief messages to the president.
Now, Trump's hawkish language came after the United States confirmed unprecedented direct talks with Hamas, with the U.S. envoy on hostage affairs, Adam Boehler, discussing American hostages. Now, the White House confirmed that U.S. officials have had ongoing talks and discussions with Hamas officials, and the United States had refused direct contact with the militants since banning them as a terrorist organization in 1997. But White House press secretary said that the hostage envoy, in his role, has the authority to talk to anyone.
the special envoy who's engaged in those negotiations does have the authority to talk to anyone. Israel was consulted on this matter. And look, dialogue and talking to people around the world to do what's in the best interest of the American people is something that the president has proven is what he believes is good faith effort to do what's right for the American people.
Israel has confirmed that it was consulted on US-Hamas direct talks as Israel-Hamas ceasefire remains in the balance.
Now, Trump said that he was sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job as his administration expedites billions of dollars in weapons. Trump's comments follow Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's warning of unimaginable consequences if Hamas does not hand over remaining hostages seized in the October 7th attack.
Hamas officials have confirmed the group held direct talks with US envoy on freeing hostages held in Gaza. A Hamas official said that the US envoy discussed about the Israeli prisoners who hold American citizenship, while another official said there had been 2 direct meetings between Hamas and US officials in Doha in recent days. And 5 Americans are still believed to be in captivity in Gaza. 4 of them have been confirmed dead and the other, Eden Alexander, is believed to be alive.
Meanwhile, family members of hostages held in Gaza attended an event at the United Nations in Geneva, marking the presentation of a UN report that recognizes hostage families as victims of Hamas's psychological terror.
Ukraine is planning to hold new talks with the United States, and this is after Washington suspended its intelligence sharing with Kiev.
Right, and this delivered, of course, a fresh blow to Kiev as it continues to battle Moscow's invasion. In a late-night address, then Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said there has been positive movement in cooperation with the United States that could lead to another meeting between the two sides soon. Information about Russia's intentions in the military movements have been critical to Ukraine's defense and a strong indication of support from the US and other Western allies.
The suspension came 2 days after US said it was pausing military aid to Ukraine, all in the aftermath of Zelensky's explosive meeting with his US counterpart Donald Trump at the White House last week. The European Union is holding a summit in Brussels to cement the bloc's support for Ukraine, and Zelensky has said he would attend it in person rather than via video conferencing.
Now, ahead of the summit, the Ukrainian president spoke with prime ministers of the Netherlands, Portugal and Slovenia, as well as with the Chancellor of Germany, highlighting how fast the diplomatic events are unfolding. In a post on social media, Zelensky said Ukraine was counting on the support of its partners.
In London, demonstrators were out in front of the US Embassy calling for more support for Ukraine, and the demonstrators highlighted how because of US cutting off aid, many at the front line were at risk.
No peace. Trust Russia. America, wake up. America, wake up. Not for sale. Ukraine is not for sale. Ukraine is not for sale. Ukraine is not for sale.
Meanwhile, things are heating up on the ground. At least 2 people were killed, 29 others injured after Russian missiles smashed into a hotel in the central Ukrainian city of Kryvyi. Municipal office said that 20 of the 29 injured in the strike are in serious condition as rescue operations proceeded past midnight. Ukraine's emergency services said 14 people have been rescued from the site so far.
On the other hand, in Russian-held Donetsk region, Ukrainian strikes destroyed 2 houses and a pipeline. According to the region's Moscow-installed leader, 3 civilians, including an 8-year-old, were injured in the strike. In another news, a British citizen captured while fighting alongside the Ukrainian army has been sentenced in Russia to 19 years in prison on charges of terrorism and mercenary activities, prompting sharp reaction from the UK. A spokesperson for the Foreign Office called the charges false and called on Russia to respect its obligation towards prisoners of war.
Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron has said that he is open to extending France's nuclear deterrent to European partners in face of threats from Russia.
Macron warned that Russian aggression knows no borders and will not stop at Ukraine. He also reiterated the possibility of sending European troops to Ukraine to enforce a peace deal.
Now, Europe is scrambling to work out its response to US President Donald Trump's upending of the transatlantic alliance. EU leaders are set to address the issue of nuclear deterrence, among other issues, during a special summit in Brussels on Thursday. The summit will focus on support for Ukraine and European defense.
France is the only nuclear power in the European Union. In a televised address to the people of his country, Macron pitched the idea of expanding the nuclear umbrella, but said that the use of France's nuclear weapons would remain only in the hands of the French president.
In response to the historic appeal of the future German Chancellor, I have decided to open the strategic debate on the protection afforded by our deterrent to our allies on the European continent. Whatever happens, the decision has always been and will remain in the hands of the President of the Republic, head of the armed forces.
Macron said France and Europe must keep helping Ukraine to resist until Kyiv can negotiate peace with Russia that is solid for themselves and for the United States. In an implicit reference to Trump's attempts to force Ukraine into peace talks with Russia, he added, I'm quoting here, peace cannot be concluded at any price.
We must continue to help the Ukrainians resist until they can negotiate a solid peace with Russia for themselves and for all of us. That's why the road to peace can't involve abandoning Ukraine. Quite the contrary. Peace cannot be achieved at any price and under Russian diktat. Peace cannot be Ukraine's capitulation. It cannot be its collapse. Nor can it mean a fragile ceasefire.
After his speech on Wednesday, Macron welcomed the Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban for a working dinner at the Elysee Palace. Meanwhile, Germany is set to ramp up defense spending with the incoming government. It wants to invest hundreds of billions of euros to bolster Europe's security as US guarantees look increasingly fragile. Likely next Chancellor of Germany, Friedrich Merz, said Tuesday that he planned to reform the country's strict constitutional debt brake to pump up defense spending and pursue massive infrastructure investments.
The parliamentary groups of the CDU, CSU and SPD will therefore be submitting a motion to the German Bundestag next week to amend the basic law to the effect that the necessary defense expenditure from the federal budget of Germany above an amount corresponding to 1% of our GDP will be exempt from the restrictions of the debt brake. I want to say this very clearly. In view of the threats to our freedom and peace on our continent, the same must now apply to our defense, whatever it takes.
The reform could see Germany's defense budget double to 100 billion euros per year. The scale of raising arms spending has not been seen since the Second World War.
The German plan to push up defense spending and White House announcement to pause tariffs on auto imports from Canada and Mexico helped global markets to a strong finish on Wednesday.
In European trading, Frankfurt surged 3.4% after the likely next Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, announced the spending plans in the hope of also reviving Europe's biggest economy.
Now, European defense and manufacturing stocks also climbed as bourses in Paris and Milan won solid gains. And back in New York, Wall Street stocks got a positive jolt from President Donald Trump's latest pivot on tariffs. US automakers have been among the most exposed to Trump's trade policy with 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada. But following talks with the big three US automakers, Stellantis, Ford and General Motors, Trump decided to give a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through the North American Free Trade-backed USMCA.
The reciprocal tariffs will go into effect on April 2nd, and he feels strongly about that no matter what, no exemption, so that's where the 1 month comes from.
Does he expect them to be able to shift production within a month?
He told them that they should get on it, start investing, start moving, shift production here to the United States of America where they will pay no tariff. That's the ultimate goal.
But prospects of wider relief were dampened after Trump's call with Trudeau, with the US leader saying he was unconvinced Ottawa had done enough to address Washington's concerns over illicit fentanyl. For more on this, our correspondent Susan Tehrani has also sent us this report. Listen to this.
U.S. President Donald Trump has granted a 1-month exemption from tariffs for cars and trucks imported from Canada and Mexico, as long as they comply with the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement content rules. This means that vehicles with 75% North American content will be tariff-free. The exemption is huge relief for automakers like Ford and General Motors, who already comply with these complex rules. Stocks for some of these companies rose significantly, with General Motors up 5.3%, Ford up 4.1%. However, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is unwilling to lift Canadian retaliatory tariffs on the United States until Trump removes all tariffs on Canada. The tariffs have caused tension, threatening Canada's economic recovery and potentially triggering a recession. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
And in less than 1 week, Greenland, an autonomous territory under Denmark, will be contesting elections.
Well, the stakes are high for Greenlanders as they head out to vote on the 11th of March. US President Donald Trump is keenly watching this election and has even talked of a takeover of the country sooner or later.
Now, ahead of the pivotal polls next week, Greenland passed a law on Tuesday that blocks foreign or anonymous political donations. The move overlaps with Trump's speech to a joint congressional session in which the US president pushed forward with his territorial ambitions to make the region a part of the United States.
Greenland has been on Trump's target since December last year. Shortly after winning a sweeping mandate, the US president amplified his desire to make Greenland a part of American territory.
So what does Greenland have? It doesn't have much people, 57,000. It doesn't have an awful lot of plants. I've been there. It's beautiful if you like white ice. But what it does have buried underneath that ice, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, is a lot of oil, billions of barrels of oil, and trillions of cubic feet of natural gas. And even more important, it has rare earth elements that are needed for things in telecommunications, like your cell phones. Right now, we get much of that from China.
Now, Trump's remarks have raised fear among many of potential interference in Greenland's electoral and political process. The island's independence and many other issues became hot topics for a debate among Greenland's leaders on Tuesday.
Let's listen in to some reactions coming in from Danish citizens on Trump's ambitions for Greenland.
I don't think Trump is serious, not at all. He only wants to be powerful, and he don't think about the consequences.
We are in the North American continent, and if Denmark can't defend Greenland, Trump has to do something about it. He says some of the words because he wants to wake up Denmark.
It's like the biggest awakening for everyone in Greenland, because now everyone in Greenland needs to have an opinion whether we should stay under Denmark, whether we should become independent, or whether we should become a state under the United States.
Now, as Muslims in Nigeria begin observing the month of Ramzan, shoppers are seeing a drop in essential food prices.
And this follows a prolonged cost of living crisis and offers temporary relief to distressed Nigerian shoppers.
This time of Ramadan, we are experiencing some drastic reduction in some prices, like beans, rice, and all these perishable products. I mean, pepper, tomato, onion, and others like that. For example, like rice now, like the acre of rice, we used to buy 1,004 before. Now it has come down to 1,001, 1,002.
Now, the country's GDP grew by 3.8% in the fourth quarter of 2024, marking the fastest growth in 3 years. This growth follows a series of tough reforms under President Bola Tinubu's administration. This includes the removal of fuel subsidies and the liberalization of the Naira exchange rate. While the economy shows positive growth, inflation remains a concern for Nigerians. The latest data reveals inflation dropped by 24.48% in January 2025, a notable decline from December's 34.8%. While some sound disinflation alarms, experts point to security improvements as the major factor.
CPI has moderated from 34% to 24%. This in itself does not mean disinflation. What has happened is that we have rebased the basket we use in computing CPI. Food prices have gone down marginally because of security improvements in farms and food producing areas. However, we expect an uptick because of the Ramadan that we have just begun.
However, the cost of living continues to rise, with rents in Lagos seeing dramatic increases between 100 to 200%. Many Nigerians are still struggling with higher prices, especially as wages haven't kept pace with inflation. And these soaring rents are putting immense pressure on households, especially in the country's economic capital.
Now, despite the turbulence, President Tinubu remains optimistic, stating that the country is moving towards brighter days. As Nigeria works towards reducing dependence on imported petroleum and food, the hope is that these reforms will stabilize prices and strengthen the economy in the long term.
I am deeply aware of the struggles many of you face.
And with that, it's time now for a short break.
Don't go anywhere. Haim and I will be back with you after this short break. On the other side, lots more lined up. US electric car maker Tesla is set to open its first showroom in India's Mumbai city. We'll bring you the latest on that.
The Philippines has made it clear that it will take all possible measures to counter any attempt by China to impose an air defense zone or restrict freedom of flights over the South China Sea. More details on the other side. Stay tuned.
India's Global Voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one.
Amid the mayhem and chaos of M23's takeover of the DRC, more than 50,000 people flee to Burundi, risking their lives by swimming across the Rusizi River. Over 20 dead in the last 2 weeks. The US government's sudden decision to axe funding for HIV programs is a wake-up call for South Africa. The country's health minister says the cuts could lead to deaths. And the love life of South Africa's Zulu king has the country excited and in suspense, and has scandalized his socially conservative subjects as he messes with tradition by seeking a divorce. Wild of Africa at these times on WION. Wild is one.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Know more, understand better, think ahead. Hello and a very warm welcome. You are watching Gravitas with me, Molly Gambhir. Get the facts, not the bombast. On the 26th of March, dynamic pricing, Baloch separatists Gravitas cuts out the clutter. Gravitas keeps calm when others scream. Gravitas brings news to life. Weekdays 9 p.m. IST, 3:30 p.m. GMT. Gravitas. Seeing is believing.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening. As we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The Earth is sending distress signals. Wildfires, droughts, and melting glaciers. Can we reverse the damage? Explore the harrowing effects of climate change. It's a wake-up call. Global emergency. Climate Tracker on WION World is One.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Amid the mayhem and chaos of M23's takeover of the DRC, more than 50,000 people flee to Burundi, risking their lives by swimming across the Rusizi River. Over 20 dead in the last 2 weeks. The US government's sudden decision to axe funding for HIV programs is a wake-up call for South Africa. The country's health minister says the cuts could lead to deaths. And the love life of South Africa's Zulu king has the country excited and in suspense, and has scandalized his socially conservative subjects as he messes with tradition by seeking a divorce. World of Africa at these times on WION. World is One.
To bring the benefits of the Subhash Chandra Show to your educational institution, teachers and students, send an invitation to Juhi Jha at juhi@such.org.in.
Welcome back, viewers. You're watching World DNA, the show that gets you ahead of the rest. Lots more lined up for you on this side of the show as well. Let's start with the headlines.
Donald Trump threatens further destruction of Gaza if all remaining hostages are not released. Issues ultimatum to Hamas leaders to flee the territory. US president says he is sending Israel everything it needs to finish the job.
President Emmanuel Macron announces he would discuss extending France's nuclear deterrent to European partners, raises possibility of sending European troops to Ukraine to enforce a peace deal.
A Russian missile strikes central Ukraine. Emergency officials say at least 2 killed and 14 people rescued after strike hits a hotel in the city of Kryvyi Rih.
Mohammad Sharifullah, an Islamic State operative accused of planning the 2021 suicide bombing outside Kabul airport, produced in a Virginia court. He was apprehended in Pakistan and has been extradited to the US.
Nobel Peace Prize laureate Malala Yousafzai returns to her village in Pakistan 13 years after surviving an assassination attempt by militants.
India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar says Kashmir issue is mostly solved, claims if Islamabad vacates Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, the Kashmir issue would be fully resolved.
Germany is pushing for an overhaul of the strict EU spending rules to allow greater long-term defense investment, signaling a major policy shift. Berlin's proposal follows likely Chancellor Friedrich Merz's pledge for increased defense and infrastructure spending.
Philippines has made it clear it will take all possible measures to counter any attempt by China to impose an air defense zone or restrict freedom of flights over the South China Sea.
Now, speaking to the media, the Philippines Defense Secretary Gilberto Teodoro said that China's aggression in the disputed waters is now considered the greatest threat to the national security of the Philippines. Confrontations over the strategic waterway, which Beijing claims almost in its entirety, have spiked between Chinese and Philippine Coast Guard and Navy forces in the last 2 years.
The Philippines will take a combination of measures, singularly and with like-minded nations, to counteract these activities of China. Naturally, we cannot discuss the specific moves, but then again, that is a very serious transgression of international law, which will demand a response.
Recent brushes involving Chinese military aircraft firing warning flares or flying dangerously close to drive away US, Australian and Philippine patrol aircraft have set off fresh alarms. Teodoro said defense officials have discussed the possibility of China imposing a so-called air defense identification zone or any exclusion zone to restrict foreign aircraft movement in what Beijing regards as its own airspace over the South China Sea. The Philippine Defense Secretary said it's China's own behavior that prompts like-minded countries to come together and act.
It is China's own behavior that is the best motive factor for like-minded countries to band together, because what it is doing is entirely unacceptable to a majority of the countries in the Indo-Pacific.
Now, US electric car maker Tesla is all set to open its first showroom in India's Mumbai city.
Elon Musk's company is moving towards its goal to sell imported cars in India, and the company has signed a 5-year lease from the 16th of February and will pay rent of about $446,000 for the first year for over 4,000 square feet of space, almost the size of a basketball court.
Reports say the rent will increase by 5% every year, reaching about over $500,000 for the 5th year. The showroom will be located in the Maker Max City, building in the business and retail hub of Bandra Kurla complex near the city's airport.
The development comes after Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi met Tesla founder Elon Musk during his Washington trip, and Tesla selected locations for 2 showrooms in the Indian cities of New Delhi and Mumbai after the car maker's chief Elon Musk met Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi. India woke up yesterday to a fresh tariffs reminder from US President Donald Trump.
A $500 billion trade target was announced during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to the United States in February, raising hopes of a recalibrated economic partnership.
Now, the recent budget also introduced duty cuts on luxury motorcycles over 1600cc, a move seen as a goodwill gesture to the US ahead of the high-stakes negotiations. But just days later, we're back to where we left off.
Now, India exports key goods like oil, petrochemicals and gems while importing raw materials and technology. However, the trade imbalance has drawn criticism from Trump, who believes that reciprocal tariffs will make America rich again. Despite a steady decline in tariffs since 1990 from 125% to under 5%, India still imposes significant duties on certain goods. Now, this led to friction in trade talks, with Trump calling India the tariff king during his first term.
Now, at the center of the debate is the issue of reciprocity. The US has maintained that trade agreements should be based on equal and mutual access. If India imposes higher tariffs on American goods, the US reserves the right to respond in kind. While this principle appears fair in theory, the implications for India are significant.
A reduction in tariffs on US agricultural products, dairy and electronic goods could lead to a surge in American imports, directly impacting Indian farmers and manufacturers. Experts warn that these tariffs could cost Indian exporters up to $7 billion annually.
Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal earlier defended India's position, arguing that tariff structures, particularly in agriculture and sensitive manufacturing sectors, are necessary to protect millions of livelihoods. Notably, Goyal is currently in the US engaging in discussions to ease the trade frictions. His agenda includes securing greater access for Indian exports, ensuring tariff relaxations on select US goods, and negotiating trade terms that do not disadvantage Indian industries. But as the pressure mounts, the critical question remains: will India's economic diplomacy be effective in securing a favorable outcome, or will strategic concessions be necessary?
Now, at the same time, India has an opportunity to expand its exports as the US looks for alternatives to Chinese imports. Key sectors that could benefit include electrical machinery, auto components, pharmaceuticals and apparel. Experts suggest that India's response strategy could involve a mix of targeted tariff reductions and enhanced export incentives to maintain trade balance.
Meanwhile, for the average Indian consumer, these tariff wars could have direct consequences. Lower duties on US imports might mean cheaper American apples, almonds and Harley-Davidsons. But if India is forced to concede, it could mean greater dependence on US goods, affecting local businesses and jobs. The stakes are high. The US is India's top export destination and 4th largest import partner. While a trade deal could ease these tensions, experts argue that India must negotiate to protect key sectors like auto manufacturing and agriculture, while ensuring that reciprocal tariffs do not disrupt its export-driven industries.
Now, China has set its fiscal deficit target for 2025 at a record 5.66 trillion yuan.
And that's the highest in over 3 decades. And this comes as the government ramps up spending to counter rising US tariffs and stimulate economic growth. Our next report takes a closer look at China's ambitious economic plans for the year ahead. Take a look.
China set its fiscal deficit target at a record 5.66 trillion yuan in 2025. Now, this is approximately 4% of GDP and is the highest since 1994. Despite rising trade tensions with the US and declining domestic consumption, Beijing is aiming for a 5% expansion this year.
The expected economic growth target of around 5% is set not only to support employment stability, risk prevention and public well-being, but also because it is backed by economic growth potential and favorable conditions.
To achieve this growth, China is ramping up fiscal spending, with the government pledging significant stimulus efforts to stabilize the economy. Now, as part of its fiscal strategy, China will issue 1.3 trillion yuan in ultra-long sovereign bonds, marking an increase from last year's 1 trillion yuan. Additionally, 300 billion yuan will fund a new trade-in program designed to boost consumer spending on durable goods like cars and appliances. The government is also allocating 4.4 trillion yuan for local governments. That is up from 3.9 trillion yuan last year. These measures are part of a broader effort to support domestic demand and drive economic growth despite external pressures.
The main targets for development this year are projected as follows: GDP growth of around 5%, surveyed urban unemployment rate of around 5.5%, over 12 million new urban jobs, CPI increase of around 2%.
While local government debt is estimated to be as high as 100% of GDP, central borrowing has increased in recent years to manage growing debt risks at local levels. Now, despite concerns over long-term inflation and debt servicing, China's officials believe that there is significant room to expand the fiscal deficit and borrow further to stabilize the economy in the short term. Business Bureau Report, WION, World is One.
And in technology, the US has launched a sweeping response to what it calls a years-long Chinese cyber espionage campaign.
Now, this includes indictments against alleged Chinese hackers, sanctions against a Chinese tech company, and a $10 million bounty for information leading to the identification or location of any person involved in the espionage campaign.
Now, according to the US Federal Office, a prolonged cyber espionage operation allegedly conducted by China targeted and stole information from victims across America and around the world. US has indicted 12 Chinese nationals, 10 of whom work for a Chinese company called Anshan Information Technology, better known as iSoon, while the other two allegedly work for the Chinese Ministry of Public Security. Now, the indictment identifies iSoon as a central figure in China's hacker-for-hire ecosystem, and the hackers are believed to have targeted the US Defense Intelligence Agency, the US Department of Commerce, the foreign ministries of Taiwan, South Korea, India, and Indonesia, news organizations critical of China, and the New York State Assembly. Hackers also hit a variety of religious figures and groups, including an unidentified large religious organization in the US.
Now, iSoon allegedly charged Chinese intelligence agencies around $10,000 to $75,000 for each hacked email inbox, plus additional fee for analysis. Meanwhile, this is not a single case of a Chinese-linked cyber espionage campaign. In a separate action, the US Treasury sanctioned a Chinese company, Shanghai Haiying Information Technology, and its founder Zhu Shuiyan for allegedly stealing and selling data from critical US infrastructure. This data reportedly ended up in the hands of another previously sanctioned Chinese hacker, Yin Keshang.